Hello everybody, it's your Peacekeeper coming at you with the first video in our How to Play series on the German cruiser lines. No, this is not the How to Hindenburg video yet. We are going to dive into the captain skills instead, so I will get Mr. Albert Maurer here, and we will begin discussing some builds. Some caveats before we get too far into this, though. I just want to go ahead and re-articulate some points that I've made in other videos, specifically with regards to the builds that I'm about to recommend are by no means the only way to set up your captains for these ships. They are merely suggestions for you to look at and think about your own play style and use what works best for you. Obviously, the skill that the captain build that I'm going to be running works well for me. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work well for you. So use these as more of kind of like a guideline more than like a hard and fast rule. I'm going to talk about three builds. I'm going to call it a anti-aircraft build, a survivability build, and then kind of a, I don't want to call it a hybrid build. It's more or less just a well-rounded jack-of-all-trades build without jack-of-all-trades as a skill. So that first one that we'll talk about is going to be the anti-aircraft build. One thing that, like the US and Royal Navy cruisers, these ships do have pretty impressive anti-aircraft, and owing in large part to their high-caliber guns, which is unlike the US, which relies almost entirely on 40 millimeters for their anti-aircraft. Anyway, with that, obviously, you can guess that manual fire control for AA is going to come in there, but here, let's talk about what skills I would take. The first skill would be preventative maintenance, and the reason why I would take preventative maintenance is I could go ahead and on my ship, instead of taking Main Armaments Mod 1, you can take Auxiliary Armaments Mod 2, because preventative maintenance is covering the chance of losing your main guns to fire. That means we can focus on anti-aircraft and secondary survivability, which is what Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1 is for. Not to be confused, that skill, preventative maintenance, doesn't actually help prevent your anti-aircraft skill guns from being destroyed or incapacitated, which I don't think they can be incapacitated, but it doesn't help with that directly. You have to run the Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1 instead of Main Armaments Mod 1 in order to get full advantage of this. In the second slot, I would recommend going to Expert Marksman, and that is going to help increase the traverse rate of your main guns. This is going to be one of the few main gun focused skills in this entire anti-aircraft build. From there, it would go to basic firing training. From there, it would go to manual fire control for AA. Oop, gotta get the right one over here. From there, it would go to advanced firing training. Then Superintendent, which gives you, the additional charge. By the way, advanced firing training, extra range, 20% to all of your anti-aircraft guns. And basic firing training, 20% to the average damage of all of your AA guns. And then, of course, manual fire control for AA is going to double anything that's larger than 85 millimeters against your priority selected target. So you're going to double your DPS for pretty much every single dual-purpose gun mount you've got. From there, you've got a couple of different choices. So Superintendent for that extra charge. From there, you've got 2 points. Personally, I'm going to pick Adrenaline Rush, and this is just going to be kind of a generic 2-pointer to grab. I suppose you could use Jack of all trades to get those consumables up slightly quicker. That's certainly an honorable mention. In the survivability build, I would start off again with preventative maintenance. I would then go to high alert. Over here, high alert, which is going to reduce the time it takes for your damage control party to come back by 10%. From there, it would go to a superintendent, then concealment expert to reduce the detection range by 12%. Then it's going to go to AFT for the increase in anti-aircraft firing range, then to basic firing training to add more DPS to those anti-aircraft guns, and then it's going to come back down to Adrenaline Rush. And the goal for this build is, you're using your AA guns here to help ward off your enemy carriers. You do have preventative maintenance to help with guns and engines and rudders being taken out, which aren't that common, but, you know, it does come to play. You could mess around with either Jack of all trades, or if you wanted to come over here, I guess you could take Last Stand. Personally, I think that would be wasted points. Your engines and your steering gears don't get knocked out that much, and if they do, your repair party should be up. If it's not, that's really unfortunate. The build that I run, I guess we'll call it this hybrid or Jack of all trades build. It's going to start off with preventative maintenance, although honestly, eventually what's going to happen is I'm going to switch it to Expert Loader as soon as I get enough free XP built up. I find Expert Loader to be far more useful overall. Being able to switch shells when you've got them loaded is kind of nice to be able to reduce that by half. It doesn't always come into play, but it certainly does help. You know, you've got a target that's switching from being head-on to you to broadside, and you'd be able to switch to AP and engage them with your AP before they, you know, get turned away from you or what have you. And so Expert Loader does have its uses, and I personally find it very useful on cruisers. From there, it goes to Expert Marksman, and I realize that somebody in the comment section is going to go, the Hindenburg has this really awesome turret traverse. Why would you take Expert Marksman? Because I can make that turret traverse that much more awesome. Really? I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And you wouldn't think that that would play that big of a role. However, it does, because anytime you have to turn your turrets 180 degrees, having Expert Marksman is actually going to help your ship get back into the fight. Plus, if you ever get into like a knife fight with another cruiser or destroyer or something, having that little bit of extra turret traverse is just going to bring the guns on target just a little bit quicker, and sometimes that can make or break the difference. Yes, Hindenburg has some pretty fast turning turrets for a tier 10 cruiser, but honestly, I like it when we've got faster turrets. From there, I'm going to go to Demolition Expert, and yes, German HE sucks. Guess what this skill is good for? Fixing that. Hindenburg starts a fairly decent amount of fires at tier 10, so by the time you reach tier 10, Demolition Expert definitely is helpful. And that's going to increase your chance of causing a fire by a mere 2%, but every little bit helps. Then I'm going to go to Concealment Expert, and the reason for that is concealment is everything. The closer I can get to targets before I have to engage them, the more likely I am to catch them off guard, which is really the strength of the US cruisers. But the German cruisers have pretty good AP too, and if you catch a cruiser broadside, you can expect to lump huge chunks of damage off of your enemies. And so getting in a little bit closer means you're more likely to catch them off guard, and you're more likely to get those big hits. Plus, it helps when you need to, you know, stop firing and evade for a bit and heal up. From there, it goes over to AFT, and this is going to push out that AA range 20%. Yes, German cruisers do have a pretty decent amount of secondaries for a cruiser. However, I'm really not building any of these ships for secondaries. From there, a superintendent for the additional consumables. The additional fighter really doesn't matter, but the additional heal and defensive fire consumable or hydro, depending on how you run your setup, definitely helps out. I can't stress how many times in Hindenburg I have actually needed that last heal, and probably could have used a couple more. So that is definitely a skill I recommend taking. And then, of course, Adrenaline Rush in the final slot to just, as you die, to make it even more damaging for them to damage you. Let's talk about some honorable mentions here before we wrap up this video. You are playing cruisers, so there's two skills in the tier 1 that I know somebody's going to poke up into the comments and say, well, why don't you recommend this? Those are going to be Priority Target and Incoming Fire Alert. These skills actually do have a fairly good use if you're not real comfortable with cruiser gameplay. I've mentioned it in other cruiser captain skills videos, specifically the US one. I personally assume that if I'm spotted, everybody's targeting me and they're shooting at me. So for me to take these 1-point skills is really kind of useless. There are other 1-point skills that actually are more useful than either of those two, in my opinion, even if we're ignoring Expert Loader and Preventative Maintenance. You could make a strong case for Direction Center for catapult aircraft. Having 2 aircraft up for 6 minutes definitely helps you out when it comes to panicking enemy bomber groups trying to sink you. That's really about the only other skill that's really all that useful in Tier 1. But like I said, by no means is this intended to be hard and fast. If you're the type of person who's not real comfortable with cruiser gameplay, or you get deleted real easily, Priority Target is probably better than Incoming Fire Alert. Although Incoming Fire Alert certainly tells you when things are coming right at you. Of course, Priority Target's going to tell you if a destroyer is launching torpedoes at you, but there's definitely a case to be made for either one of those. I already mentioned Direction Center for catapult aircraft. That's certainly another interesting Tier 1 skill. Personally, like I said, I don't find this, it's too situational, and it relies upon carriers being in the game to really take full advantage of it. And they move slower, so even if you were to supposedly spot torpedoes or a destroyer with it, it doesn't take long for them to move out of the way, and then they're gone for quite a long time, even though they got a 6-minute airtime. So, I don't know. You can make a good case for that, though. Coming all the way down here to the Tier 4 slots, Fire Prevention. This is going to reduce the number of fires that you can have, the actual sources, from 4 to 3. It combines the 2 center ones. If you're one of those people that is always getting set on fire, this probably isn't a bad idea to throw on. If you're real used to battleship play, you should be getting pretty good with holding off on that damage control party until you get at least 2 fires, if you're taking that much fire that you can't just burn it right away. So that's certainly an option for those of you who are hyper aggressive and always on fire. Basics of survivability is another one. 15% reduction of the time to repair of something, or extinguish a fire, or recover from flooding. This skill used to be like the creme de la creme of Tier 1 point skills, but at Tier 3, it's really expensive for what you get. Other Tier 3 skills are far more useful in the long run. I could make a solid case for Survivability Expert at the high tiers. Vigilance is definitely one that can be kind of underrated. Now, Vigilance, as I've mentioned before in other videos, like Priority Target and Incoming Fire Alert, by the time you've played enough games, you have an idea of where destroyers are going to be launching torpedoes from, especially if you play a lot of torpedo destroyer gameplay. And so Vigilance becomes less useful at that point, and at 3 points, it's a really hard one to stomach on these. But it's not a bad option if you're the type of player who needs the extra spotting distance on torpedoes. We've already talked about basic firing training, and Survivability Expert, that's 350 HP for each tier of ship. That's 3,500 HP. That's really not a whole lot. 3,500 HP at Tier 10. That's really not a whole lot when Hindenburg has, 51,900. So not a huge change, but, hey, some people want to run that. By all means. We didn't really talk about Jack of all trades much. This skill, I definitely think, could have some uses to reduce the consumable reload time by 5%. Again, though, at Tier 2, there's some other better options that I think just stand out a little bit better for my playstyle, but you might find it useful in like an all-out survivability build, because that does bring your damage control party down even further in combination with high alert, so it does stack with that. Anyway, those are kind of my ideas for these builds. Like I said, they're not intended to be hard and fast. These are the builds you have to run. These are just kind of ideas to give you a good solid foundation for which to build upon your captain on. Anyway, let me know down in the comments what you guys are running for captain builds on your German cruisers. Look forward to hearing from you. I'm your Peacekeeper. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for watching.